Our story was that the river was created by Wawi, which was like a big fish. He went and swam through the landscape and made all the big channels and that, and then it rained and all the water filled the bits of the river. And blackfellas, mate, that's our tucker. That's what we grew up on. They're trying to tell us not to eat them. A bit hard trying to tell an old person to chuck a good catfish back in the river. Well, we always went out and we always caught a feed. Most of the times you caught quite a few, you'd share it around with your mob. Give a few to your old uncle and aunties that don't get out and fish anymore. But it's always good to just get out in the river and sit down, chuck a line in. If you catch a fish, it's a bonus. If you don't, it was a good day. Just a bit of time out, catching a nice fish, chucking it back. They say a bad day fishing is better than a good day at work.
It's just about getting out and having a good time. Get everyone out and a campfire and sitting around having a good yarn, talking about old times and where you want to go in the future and all that sort of stuff. If you've got kids with you, ask them what their ambitions are or all that. Just trying to find out where they want to head in their life. That's what it's all about, passing on knowledge. Because everyone's got a little bit to contribute to whatever you're doing. Something, might know a different way of doing it or easier way. Always something. Someone knows something.
In my lifetime there was still lots of fish in the river, and my dad used to tell the story. In fact, all the people used to tell this story about this old Murray cod who lived in a great hole near the mission, and just about 10 minutes before it sort of got dark, he'd come out and he'd play. And there's a straight bit of river there which is probably a quarter of a mile long. He'd play up and down there for about 20 minutes. We used to, as kids, call him a whale because as he scooted along under the water squirted up in the air about 2 metres high, as he was going up and down. The generation before my dad, there was some old men decided they were going to catch him. So they put their nets in, and when they went down in the morning, they had him. He was in the net. And they were pulling him up, and the next pull would have been a lift into the boat. And the old boy went berserk, and he ripped their nets to pieces and nearly tipped them out of the boat. And so nobody ever tried to catch him after that. They said, well, he's the boss. By the time my generation, people took him for granted because they seen him like that. And of a night time, if you went down, in those beautiful sort of moony sort of nights, when you could go down there and you'd hear him playing too. And he used to grunt. I remember him, he grunted like, hence my thing of saying, how can you believe a thing like that now? Because nobody would have heard of things like that, and yet it was a part of my life. And people, in my generation and the generation just before my dad. Another important thing I think, that I remember of that period of time, where people only fished for a certain time in the year. They didn't fish all the year round like we do nowadays. They fished, and when they saw hags, they stopped.
My grandfather and father just knew where to fish, where to throw their lines and they'd catch fish, It was just natural to them. They used to use spears because the water was so clear, you could almost see the fish. It was that clear. I remember when I was a kid, you could see the lobsters. They'd fly into the logs, so you just pick the log up and drop it and the lobster would fall out. But you couldn't fish it traditionally these days because the river's too high. It's too dirty to see the fish or anything. Because you could see the fish, you could spear the fish. So canoes, they used canoes to hunt. You'd be floating down, you wouldn't be making any noise or anything, and you could spear the fish pretty easy. Like if the water's up high, you don't catch fish. I don't even bother going fishing when the river's up high. When I was younger, I used to catch yellow belly and a few cod, but now, these days, it's gone the opposite way around. You talk about like habitat traditional, what the Aboriginal people would do, they'd set aside where they wouldn't touch it and they use it in like drought hard times, you know, when food was harder to get. And that's what we should do. Because if you stop fishing in one space for 10 or 5 years, there's going to be a lot of fish bred there, isn't there? If we keep on fishing like the way we are, we're not going to have fish. If you're going to catch all these fish now, well, what's going to happen in another 10 years? People, what haven't they got any brains?
For any sort of our traditional stuff, we just like free access to, yeah, whatever we want to do. The laws weren't there before settlement, well, yeah, we'd like the Aboriginal people to go out and hunt and whatever without getting permits and all this sort of stuff. Because we don't just go out to hunt for ourselves, we hunt for families, communities, community events and that. We collect a lot of the food and that, bring back to the community, share it around.